I'd like to introduce Tara, who holds a Master of Education in Health Education. She has over 20 years of experience in organizational development. She's a longtime practitioner of mindfulness meditation and an advocate for the health benefits associated with its practice. So I will let you, Tara is the architect of Harvard Pilgrim's innovative program, adapting the principles of mindfulness meditation to a corporate environment. So this is something that Tara does for the thousands of employees for Harvard Pilgrim, but she is also a resource to employers.
Yes.
And so I think that, last year we did yoga, which is really sort of very much tied into it. And so I think that sometimes we go through our days and we don't really think about why, if you could write down what you're doing in your day and say, is this really what I want to be doing? Or if I took a few moments to think about where I want to spend my time, what I want to focus on, what I want to think about, I think that this is a great introduction to that. So
Great.
Thank you, Tara.
Thank you. Thanks so much. Well, I'm delighted to be here and to have the opportunity to talk about mindfulness, which really, for a long time was somewhat fringe, would not necessarily have been considered mainstream, especially in healthcare. But how many have heard or read about mindfulness, say, within the past year? And if I asked this 10 years ago, there would have been very few hands that went up. So just a little bit more, my own personal history with meditation is that I have been practicing since the 80s. And was very interested, actually, even before that, when I was in high school. I was just kind of interested in how the mind worked, although I'm not sure I would have used that exact language. But more like, why were some kids happy and some kids not so happy? And so really just the nature of the mind. And for many, many years, so I started working for Harvard Community Health Plan in the 80s, and Harvard Community Health Plan became Harvard Pilgrim Healthcare. So I was both on the healthcare delivery side, and now I'm on the insurance side. So it's a little background. But all along my professional career, which mostly was in human resources as an organizational development consultant, I have been practicing something called insight meditation. And there are many, many forms of meditation. Anybody in here have any kind of a meditative practice? Could be yoga or Tai Chi or, yes, okay. So I want to talk about mindfulness as both a wellness and a business practice. And what I'm going to do first is give you basically a little mini kind of training on mindfulness and what it is. And then the second half, I want to talk about Harvard Pilgrim as a case study and sort of how and why we brought this particular topic to our employees and where we are now and kind of where we're going, and some of our key learnings at Harvard Pilgrim. So I often start when I introduce this topic to groups with the following quote by William James, which is, "The faculty of voluntarily bringing back a wandering attention over and over again is the very root of judgment, character, and will, and an education which would improve this would be an education par excellence." And so essentially what he's saying is that if we can train our attention and gain a little bit of focus and steadiness, that will actually help us align with our deepest values for who we want to be in the world, for how we want to show up in the world. It's the very root of judgment, character, and will, because the idea is that when we have a mind that is a bit steadier, we are less reactive and more responsive to all the things that happen to us. It's sort of like mindfulness creates a gap or a pause between impulse and action. So the more awake and aware and alert we become, the more steadier our mind becomes, the more we sort of employ that steadiness in the service of our lives and the service of everyone else's. I also love this because he's not a monk. He's, look at when he was born. He was a Harvard professor. And he has many quotes related to this idea of having more focus and concentration and a steadier mind. I want to talk about what mindfulness is not and what it is, because there is so much misconception. So mindfulness is not a relaxation technique. There are many forms of meditation that are aimed at relaxation. This is not one of them. It is not about creating special states. It's not about analyzing or trying to figure things out. And it is not trying to stop your thoughts. So when I first started teaching this at Harvard Pilgrim, I would run into people in the hall and they'd say, oh, Tara, I'd love to take that class, but I just can't turn this mind off. And I said, you are not alone. The mind produces a lot of thought, and I'll get into that in just a little bit. But these are some, not all, but some of the common misunderstandings. Mindfulness is a practice. It is one of the few things in life that I know of that is simple, but it is not easy to do. It's a discipline. So just like exercise, it requires a regular commitment. And it is really about seeing clearly the way things actually are. Not how we think they should be or how we wish they were, but it's the ability to see with greater clarity how things are. So let me say a little more about what it is. So mindfulness is a quality of mind that is awake, that is aware, that is alert, and that knows it. So it's a quality of mind that's awake, aware, and alert, and knows it. So the opposite is when you are lost in thought. So have you ever driven home and then you get there and you go, wow, I am not quite sure how I wound up here. Or you walk into a room and you're like, okay, now why am I here? So the opposite is when we're lost in thought, we are just that, meaning that we are not awake, aware, alert. We don't know it. But have you ever been ruminating, which is the mind does a lot of, so you're ruminating and then you have this moment of going, whoa, where was I? Like the moment that you wake up and you see that you are no longer in rumination, you are now awake, you are aware, you are alert, and this is where everything can happen. So there was this really interesting study done at Harvard by this guy named Killingsworth, and I think Gilbert. It was two guys, but I know Killingsworth was one of them. And this is a really, really well-designed study. And basically what they did is they gave people like beepers, pagers, and what they would do is randomly page and say, like, what are you doing? And are you happy? Where's your mind? Where's your attention? So they'd say, what are you doing? Where's your attention? And are you happy? So the name of the study is A Wandering Mind is an Unhappy Mind. So what they found is that 47% of the time people were mind wandering, and this is a very large study. So almost half the time, this is interesting, I think it could possibly be even a little higher, we are actually in the past or the future with thoughts. Can anybody relate to that? It's pretty amazing, isn't it? And the happiness piece, and Killingsworth, they're the people at Harvard that are doing really kind of interesting work around happiness and what makes people happy, that most of the time when you are in rumination, you're actually not all that happy. So I'll say a little bit more about, but I want to be cautious and be aware of time. So what's happening when we start to train our attention is that meditation, and I'll talk about the distinction between mindfulness and meditation and how they're also the same. But with mindfulness, when we're more aware and awake, we can more regularly monitor our own attention. It's like we are in the driver's seat. So have you ever been in a meeting and somebody calls on you, but you've been planning dinner, and you're like, what was I? Where was I?
Can you repeat that question?
Yeah, and we all have, I mean, it's, it's happened, of course, to me. I mean, it's, it happens. But the idea is the more we're actually learning to train our attention, the more we can, when we're in those meetings and we're planning or, doing something else, we can go, oh, and just return. You can intentionally regulate your attention with greater accuracy, bringing yourself back. And at work, it's really important. I mean, it even happens, we can be talking to somebody, and they're talking, but we're planning, or, we've got something else going on. So in many ways, what we're doing with this particular practice is we're just learning to kind of hone our capacity to be more present, to be more awake, to be more aware. And so the other thing I want to say about that, while there's a lot of really interesting research right now that's happening, which is why this practice is getting a lot of attention and it's legitimizing the practice. But I always go back to this practice is empirical in nature. So what I suggest to people when they're taking classes is, if you find some interest in this and you want to start to train your attention, notice qualitatively what the difference is as you're living your life through your days. So if you're, come home from work and you go for a walk, when you're lost in thought from that walk, and then all of a sudden you wake up qualitatively, right then and there, ask yourself, what's the difference between being lost and now waking up? So I want to illustrate the sort of the second half of the definition of mindfulness by telling you a quick story. So the first half of the definition of mindfulness is that it is simply a quality of mind that is awake, that is aware, that is alert, and that knows it. So we're not lost in thought. We know it. We're here. Now it has some qualifiers to it, and I want to illustrate that through a story. So this is George Schaller, and he was a primate biologist, and he was studying primates, and he was getting like the most amazing data. And there were a lot of scientists studying primates, but Schaller is coming out with all this great stuff. I mean, he knows about their family structures, their mating habits, the kind of food they eat, their hierarchy. He's getting it all. And a lot of the other scientists are not getting it. Not only are they not getting it, but they're like, what is Schaller doing? He's getting all this really good stuff. The main thing that distinguished George Schaller from the other scientists is that George Schaller did not carry a weapon. So what was happening is that you've got all these other researchers that are going into the jungle, and they're entering with fear, they're entering with a defensive posture, and they all have weapons. Now George Schaller, on the other hand, he enters without a lot of fear, with patience, with respect, with curiosity, with openness, and he moves slowly toward them over time. And so what happens is they start to trust and they start to reveal. So this is exactly how we enter the terrain of our own mind and body. We enter with curious, receptive, open, patient qualities in the mind. And that is really, really important, because I think at times we can be our own harshest critics. And so what happens when we meditate is that one of the reasons meditation is so hard is because we are no longer distracted by anything, and we can be flooded with lots of stuff that doesn't feel good. But in these practices, this is what it's for. It's a way to sort of engage and work with. Anxiety is common when you first start meditating. It's not bad or wrong, and you can actually do it. We sometimes in meditation practice, you can notice judgment of yourself or other people, and then we can be hard on ourselves for that. So in this particular practice, we are sort of greeting ourselves with this kind of open, receptive, curious stance in the mind. Any questions? Okay. So it is awake, aware, alert with curiosity and receptivity. And we're going to practice too. We'll go through practice. So I said this kind of sums it up. In a sense, when we meditate, you are like a reporter. You are curious, open, receptive, and without judgment. Now, the idea is that our minds judge a lot. And I always say judging has a beneficial component. We need to be able to discern what is healthy and good and right, but we all know there is a dark side to judgment. And so in this particular practice, we will see judgment arise, and all you have to do is actually let it be there. See how it's showing up physically. What's the physical manifestation of that? But our deep conditioning means that we are often lost in thought of the past or the future with a consequent disconnection from our moment. So how many can relate to this slide? Right? I mean, the mind has no pride. It'll just go anywhere. And thankfully, we don't have ticker tapes across our forehead, like revealing what's there. But the mind will go anywhere. And it's another thing in this. It's powerful. It's powerful. So partly what we are learning is, in a sense, we are getting more in the driver's seat and not believing everything we think. And we are not our thoughts, but all of us have been exposed to so much in our lifetimes. And random thoughts enter our heads, and we don't have to really give that a lot of attention. So I just want to say, I'm here to say, you are not your thoughts. You don't have to believe everything you think. And that we give a lot of power to that. I mean, especially if you ever wake up in the middle of the night and then the part of what's going on there when you wake up in the middle of the night and then the thoughts are just churning out, and they're usually not pleasant. So, you know, there's a way to work with that where you see, you know, so you're lost in, let's say you wake up in the middle of the night, you're lost in a scary thought, and then you see it. The moment you see it, it actually loses a little bit of power. So it's seen. And what you would do is just see if you could even name it, worry, planning, whatever, release it, and bring your attention to the sensations that are happening in your body. Just see if you can just let your attention rest on what's physically going on in the body, or bring your attention to breathing in and breathing out. Just breathing in and breathing out. And the mind will go back, and it's okay, because you're not trying to stop thought, you just don't want to engage the thought, okay? That's the really important point in meditation. You're not trying to stop it, it's going to happen. And you'll be really frustrated if you say, I'm going to sit and not think. You'll be fighting with yourself. But it's much easier to be like, okay, the thoughts are going to come and go. When I see them, I can label them, release them, and just return to the breath or body. So I see, this is one of the few things that I feel in life where we have like a double benefit here. So you've got health and wellness and worksite benefits. So some of the neuroscientists that are studying the impact of meditation are really, really credible, and their work is pretty remarkable. So if you're interested in the research, if you go to the Harvard Pilgrim website, and I left cards up here, you can click on the research tab, and we've kind of condensed it. But essentially, immune function, decrease in inflammation, these are all various studies showing these benefits. And then on the worksite, productivity, social, emotional, memory, creativity, focus, impulse control, perspective taking. The more we're in charge of our own mind, the more we are actually able to control impulses. You know, even part of it too is like if you're working with somebody who typically pushes your buttons, there can be all kinds of thoughts going on when you're having a conversation. We often are aware of those thoughts on some level, but not necessarily in the way I'm talking about it here. So where you're really waking up and seeing, wow, I got a lot of stuff with this person, you know, and you're seeing what's physically happening. And it allows you that pause to actually take an action that is more skillful and less harmful. The bottom line is you have a little less regret the more you practice, which is a good thing. I threw a multitasking slide into my presentation recently because I kept getting so many questions about it. So here's the deal. Multitasking, there are numerous studies that show multitasking is not effective, that it decreases productivity by as much as 40%, and it decreases IQ in men by 10 points and women 8 points. And there have been a couple of really interesting studies on multitasking, but we do it. And in a sense, what we're doing is just switch tasking. But what I often say to people is, I don't know that you absolutely have to completely give it up. What you want to do is actually use the practice of being aware and awake, mindfulness, being aware and awake, to help you discern what you're going to do. So if you're working on something and your phone rings, but you know you're not expecting an urgent call, maybe you just send call. Or, you know, maybe you choose. But watch your habits and tendencies. So that's really the main point in this. Not to not do it, but watch your habits and tendencies. Is this really needed? And even with your smartphone, I say check on a we tend to check a lot more than we need to. It's a really, really interesting practice to see the desire to check. No, you're not expecting something. You know, if you're expecting something urgent, that's different. But if you're not, it's a really interesting practice to just kind of renounce that desire to, you know, just like, okay, not going to check. Yes?
Are we allowed to, like, engage? Is that okay? Or are you flowing? I don't want to mess up
Oh,
your
no,
flow.
go.
I just have to ask this
Yeah,
question
yeah.
because this is huge. Social media, okay? And you're talking, I like where you're going with the awake, aware, the alert.
Yes.
And, you know, would you say that that's probably not being very mindful? And it's contributing to your stress level because you're finding out where everybody else is? Should I remove the app?
No, it's a really great question. The thing with mindfulness is that you want you want to use it to help you see kind of where you are and what you're doing and how it's impacting you. So I think oftentimes we can actually be more contracted and tense in our bodies than we are aware of. And so it's using it to see, like, is this really supporting me? Is this of value for me? And maybe the answer sometimes is yes, and maybe sometimes it's no. I think in part with social media, you know, and this, I mean, long-term research is still out on this, but there is this really strong desire in most of us to stay distracted. And I think that that is more the issue. Like, why can't we just be? You know, so there is this, we are always leaning forward. Like, you can be washing the dishes, but you're already thinking about laundry. Or you're at work doing something, a project, but you are thinking about and leaning into the thing that's next, or that thing that's hanging back, So use it to help you see where you are and how you're feeling, and use it to help you see. So it's not that it's not mindful. If you're using social media and you're fully aware and awake, well, you're mindfully using social media. But if you start to actually notice that your shoulders are slowly creeping up like this, and you know, because you want to use it to really help you see. And you know, I could go on and on also about, and I won't, but about this desire to stay distracted constantly, and what is that? And that this is a practice that can actually help us work with anxiety, because most people walk around with some degree of anxiety. And so this is a practice that can, when we stay distracted, that actually masks the anxiety, which is one of the reasons we stay distracted. So what about if I learn to actually see if I can be with this anxiety, this uncomfortableness, and see what happens? So I want to move into meditation. So the idea is that mindfulness is this quality of mind about being awake and aware. Meditation is the tool or technique that we use to actually cultivate it or bring it about. It's like if you want a strong and flexible body, you exercise. And I'll use that analogy in a minute, but I want to quickly say, meditation is like a fitness routine for the mind. So what you're doing when you actually practice meditation is you're developing the muscle of concentration. And we now know through Dr. Richard Davidson at the University of Wisconsin, Dr. Sarah Lazar, that kind of mental exercise of coming back over and over and over again to a particular object, it strengthens and changes certain structures in the brain. So basically when we meditate, and there are a million different ways to meditate, but when we meditate, we are aiming and sustaining our attention on a particular object. Thoughts will come and go, not to worry. You simply aim and sustain over and over again. The body sensations and actually breath are great things to start with because they're always with us. We don't have to manufacture something. Now, a common question I get is, well, can I bring myself to my favorite place? Can I actually go to a beach that I love and just imagine myself there? Now, that's a different kind of practice, because what we're talking about with mindfulness is about being where you are, about being present where you are. So the other thing that if you pick a place that you like, you could go there and start going, well, maybe next time I'm going to bring so-and-so, and maybe I'll make a dinner out of it. You know, I mean, it's like the mind just goes, you know. So the caution I use with that is that you want to be where you are. The breath and body sensations keep you immediately present, so you're right there. So the exercise analogy, I'll just tell you quickly, is that if you wanted to have a strong and flexible body, you would pick an exercise, and there are lots to choose from. And you would say, okay, you know, 5 or 6 days a week, I'm going to exercise for, you know, 15 to 45 minutes. And so you go to the gym, or you take walks, or you run, or you lift weights, or, you know, you do whatever you do. And you do it so that you're strong and flexible, not just when you're at the gym, not just when you're out taking a walk, but you're developing through that regular discipline practice abiding traits in your body, so that you can then take that strength and flexibility and bring it into the service of your life, right? So you can lift children, so you can lift things, you can take stairs, you can basically do what it is that you need to do. You're developing abiding traits every time you're in the gym. The same exact thing is true of meditation. You pick a meditative exercise, and I'll take you through one. You say, okay, you know what, I'm going to give this a shot for, the next 2 months. I'm going to do 10 minutes of seated breath meditation every day. And you are developing abiding traits in your capacity to be more awake and aware. What you're doing when you meditate, essentially, is calibrating the mind. Anybody ever see a level?
Mm-hmm.
You're sort of, so I think of meditation as a calibration. You're basically calibrating the instrument through the practice of meditation, the instrument being the mind. And then you're able to employ the mind in the service of your life and the service of other lives with greater accuracy and greater skill. So this is from Dr. Sarah Lazar, and I'm going to go through it quickly because I want to just double check how we're doing on time. Okay, I think we're good. So Dr. Sarah Lazar is at Mass General. She's fabulous. You can link over to her website from the Harvard Pilgrim website. She's a friend of ours in our program. But she took a bunch of people in the Boston area, and she had 2 cohorts, and she put them through functional MRI screening before taking them through an 8-week meditative training. She then took them through 8 weeks of meditation practice and put them back in the functional MRI machine. And so here's some of, but not all of, what she found. And these were just people like us. These were not like experienced meditators or monks. It was really a cross, it was like a cross section of, it's like us. And we go through functional MRI, we do 8 weeks of training. Now, the average daily practice turned out to be about 17 minutes. So what she found is greater activation in the posterior cingulate cortex, tempoparietal junction, cerebellum, and hippocampus. So, I'm putting what that particular structure does on. It does many more things than just this. But so what happened is there was enough activity to actually for it to be considered valid. Hippocampus. There was a really interesting study done with cab drivers in London. And what they found is their hippocampus was far more well-developed than, say, ours, because the nature of their work asked them to really know the grid really, really well. And so they had to train their minds to really understand the grid in London. So their hippocampus was developed. So the idea is that, and for many years it was believed that we could not actually change structures in the brain, many, many years. But we now know through some of the technology that is available that we can, through this kind of repetition, this kind of exercise. The other, I just want to say, prefrontal cortex and amygdala also. The amygdala was the organ that actually got a little bit smaller in the test sample, and you would want that because the amygdala is the part of the brain that responds to fear and stress. So it actually decreased in activity. It was the only structure that had a little bit less activity. But that is the direction you would want it to go. The prefrontal cortex is the executive function. And it's not fully developed until we're like in our mid-20s. So that's why teenagers often are not making all the best choices, because that part of the brain, it's literally, it's kind of like, the prefrontal cortex is literally like the CEO of the brain. But the amygdala is the board of directors. So the amygdala can trump the CEO. And I'll tell you, they form, these 2 structures have what's called a neural highway that runs between them. And so, the prefrontal is analyzing. Now, what can sometimes happen, have you ever seen anybody just have a complete and total meltdown? They just lose it, right? That's called an amygdala hijack. So it means that the prefrontal cortex actually did not have enough time to assess. It just wasn't, because the prefrontal cortex, it is the executive, it would say, no, don't, you don't have to do that. But the amygdala can be hyper-responsive. Meditative practices actually keeps these 2 structures working in a little bit better order. So that, because both of those structures are impacted. But the prefrontal cortex actually holds the circuitry to inhibit the amygdala. So it really behooves us to keep them in good working order. And unfortunately, it's changing now, but as children, I really, really wish that as a child I was taught this in grammar school and through high school. And there's so much being done right now with kids because of the science. So I'm really glad How about that? So anyway, there's lots, if you go to the Harvard Pilgrim website, click the research tab, and there's lots of cool stuff. So let's practice. And then I want to tell you the Harvard Pilgrim story. So that was just like a little kind of mini snapshot of what mindfulness is, what the benefits are, what meditation practice is, and what the distinction between mindfulness and meditation is. So before we actually do that, we'll just do a very short guided practice, probably 3 minutes. And you can tilt the head down slightly. And eyes open or closed. So if you want to keep your eyes open, it's absolutely fine, but you just want to be gazed down. And closing the eyes is also fine. So taking a moment to settle into this seated position and making any, little kind of micro movements so that you're sitting in a way that is relaxed, yet at the same time engaged. So that you're holding yourself upright with a straight but relaxed spine. Letting go of all that has already happened today and release anticipation of what might be next. So bringing the mind and the body together, settling in and turning the attention inward and noticing your body as a whole. So any kind of sensations, vibration, pulsing, perhaps points of contact with the body and the surface, taking a moment to just notice what's there and what is making itself known to you. What are the kind of sensations you are aware of in the body? And as you're doing this, perhaps noticing any areas that you might be holding and seeing if you can soften a little bit. I'm going to now ask you to begin to narrow the focus of your attention from whole body to the sensations that you're aware of when you breathe in and when you breathe out. And please know that you can let your body breathe exactly as it needs to. You don't have to create any kind of special breath. Just let your body do the work. So breathing in and breathing out. Perhaps noticing the sensation in the abdomen or the chest, or the air entering and leaving the nose, or someplace else. But taking a moment to narrow the focus of attention and see if you can find where in the body the sensation of breathing is most pronounced. Once you've established that place, either one that I mentioned or perhaps just an overall sense of body breathing in and out, as the mind and the attention wanders into thought, which is natural, each time you become aware of that, release the thought and just return to that location you've selected. With your attention until you can no longer hear it, and put your hand up when you can no longer hear the sound. So, wandering thoughts, hands up, how many? Yeah, of course, just part of the game, just what happens, you know, it's not a big deal. Any other comments or thoughts or questions about practice? It's literally like if you wanted a strong bicep, you would lift weights again, you would lift a weight against the resistance to build that strength and flexibility in that muscle. And so that you could then use that arm in the service of your life. It's the exact same thing, only you're not lifting against the resistance of a weight, but you are lifting against the resistance of the thinking mind. Thinking mind is not a problem. You're just basically, when you meditate, it's like a little time at a time. It's like, okay, I'm not going to engage and indulge in those thoughts, because right now I'm going to practice. Yes?
What do you do with the physical awareness, like the external noises are like I'm sitting here and I have a headache, and so as I'm meditating I feel like my head hurts, let's say.
Yeah. Sometimes also the practice can just make things more noticeable, which is why it's hard. This is one of the reasons it's hard, because it can point out either a headache or back pain or anxiety. So here's the thing, if your attention is called, if let's say you're deciding I'm going to do some breath meditation or I'm going to do body scan meditation, which is also on, and so you have an object to come back to, but there's a lot of sound. What you want to do is just release the object, meaning let's say body, and go into something that is called just open awareness, which is you're no longer holding tightly to breath or body, but you're actually just staying with the sound that happens to be happening. So there was like sound out there. You know what? You can just let that go, because otherwise you're going to allow yourself to be frustrated and distracted with it. But so when you notice that happening, which is normal, you just release the object you're working with and open to the sound, and just let the sound be what it is. Let it do its thing. And if it's body pain, you can also do the same thing. So it might seem counterintuitive, like if I have a muscle cramp or an itch or a headache, if I turn toward it, which is what I would ask you to do, it might exacerbate it, but I would say test that out for yourself. So the instructions in the practice, for the most part, if you have an itch or a cramp or a headache, is to actually release your primary object and turn toward that. And when I say turn toward it, I just mean let your attention be with what it is that's happening. So if you have a headache, what's the manifestation in your body? Rather than, oh my gosh, I hope it goes away, it's different than what does it actually feel like? Do you see the difference? What does it actually feel like? I added that slide. I mean, have you ever found yourself in a thought loop just like, wow, this is just not going anywhere? So it's a way, meditation and mindfulness is a way to actually help to kind of break that. Okay, this is a quick kind of technique that I teach in the class too, which is right out of the mindfulness-based stress reduction at UMass, and they teach something called STOP. So when you notice that you're triggered by something, literally just pause, take a breath, observe what it is that's going on, and let that then inform your action, so that you're informed by mindful attention and not habit and reactivity. Everybody gets that, right? So, and it's really quick. So the more we practice, the more we see fear, anger, judgment arising, the more we can kind of take a breath, notice what it is that's happening, and then let that inform what we do. So the practice informs your speech and action. And this other one that I love a lot, and it's really basic, by Dr. Rick Hansen. And basically he's doing a lot of research on positivity, and that we can actually cultivate qualities in the mind that are positive through simply scanning the environment and savoring what you find for as little as 30 seconds. And we are starting to make brain change through that. So we as humans tend to have a bit of a negativity bias, and and that's actually primal. It goes way, way back. But we can actually work with this in terms, like if you're out for a walk, and it can be simple, like today, I think the sun is supposed to come out, and just literally feeling the warmth of the sun for 30 seconds. This is not a long time. You're not doing, and testing this out for yourself over and over again. All right, so let me kind of move into what we did at Harvard Pilgrim. So I have a Yeah. So I want to tell you how and why we introduced this program at Harvard Pilgrim. First of all, we're a not-for-profit health plan. We've got about 1,100 employees, and we are in Massachusetts, Maine, and New Hampshire, and now Connecticut. And we have a full range of health insurance choices, funding arrangements, and cost sharing. So it's just kind of a bit about who we are. So basically in 2005, it started as an idea. And what happened is I was co-chairing a committee of employees with the Vice President of Human Resources. And we were meeting monthly with employees that represented all the various business parts of the company. So like finance and member service and HR and all the different areas. And every month, now these people would come together to discuss morale and employee engagement. And then all of that data would get fed to senior leaders who manage these organizations. So it was a group of people that were well respected by their peers. So every month, I kept saying, wow, there's a lot of stress. And it would show up as like people are sending choppy emails, or they're being short with each other, or, you know, I mean, it's stuff that happens a lot. And so I said to the VP, you know what, instead of doing a more traditional stress management program, in addition to other things, because there is never one thing that is going to deal with this. It's really a pie that has many different components. But as one little slice of the pie, would you ever consider bringing meditation in a secular way? And I know about this program at UMass called Mindfulness-Based Stress Reduction, and I don't want to do that program, but I want to go through it and adapt it for a work environment. Now, I happen to have worked with this VP for quite a while, so she didn't really even know that much about my meditation practice because it wasn't something I talked a lot about. I mean, why would I? You know, it's not like you go around telling people you meditate. So it just never came up. So I had shared with her my history with the practice, and I said, you know what, let's run a 6-week course, and we'll meet for about an hour and a half once a week, and we'll mix it up by age, race, gender, and level in the company. And that was a good move, because in some ways, her name's Deb Hicks, she's now at Dana-Farber, but she said, she kind of took it all in, and she goes, all right, Tara, let's do it, but not tell anybody, meaning, let's not make a big senior leader, you know, should we do this class or not, or, you know, let's just do it. So that's what we did. And we ran it in 2006 as a pilot with a cross-section of staff, and I was literally teaching meditation at work, but adapting it to fit the work environment. So some of the examples that I used about, you know, employees triggering buttons, because we tend to be with our coworkers more than we're with our families almost. And so the first program was a success, and I literally mean it when I say it went viral in our company. And I had no idea that this would happen, and I mean that. And in fact, I didn't even care on some level if it took off. I just wanted to try it. I thought it might be, because meditative practices and working with the mind have, in my opinion, a much deeper and more profound impact than more of a traditional approach. And so it took off and went viral in the company. And what happened is now I'm working in HR doing OD, but now I'm training mindfulness because there are 80 people on a wait list. And it was really crazy. And in 2006, this was not a common term in our culture. So we kept it in-house, and from 2006 through we just offered to employees. And then it made sense, so I stayed in HR, but it made sense for us to start to just open it up and offer to our accounts. And then we started to open it up to our non-accounts. So we basically started, and then adapting it. Our flagship program was the 6-week program, but we have 1-hour programs, we have 3-hour programs, we have 4-week classes, we have 6-week classes, so we have a whole range of ways to offer it. And we did that based on, as the need was evolving over the years, we kind of kept up with the need. So there's been a steady increase in interest. We started a Facebook page called Mind the Moment, which you can get over to. If you're interested in more info, the card is right there. But our Mind the Moment web Facebook page is, I think it's pretty good. So there's like 4 of us that work on posting. And we try to find things that other sites related to mindfulness are not going to have. And so we try to keep it interesting, engaging, and unique. So we have been in over 80 organizations and trained over 4,000 people. We do pre, post, and 6 months out data. I know I don't have a lot of time, so, but basically, and I've already kind of gone through this, we had worksites. There were 4 conditions that came together to support. They were worksite stress through that committee. Now, completely separate, in 2005, what was also happening is that there was a lunch and learn at our organization that had nothing to do with us, and it happened to be on meditation and mindfulness. And they had, let's see, 110 people sign up, which was like crazy. I mean, you get 15 for a lunch and learn. So it was like, wow, there's a lot of people interested. The qualified facilitator was me, and then we did have leadership support for a grassroots effort. And we had the VP, but we kept it really on the down low. So we had, it just so happened our associate medical director's wife was a practitioner. And so he kind of knew, he's like, oh, that would be so cool to bring this in. So we had, but it was very under, it was really under the radar. So here are some of the questions that we ask, and a little bit of, there's more, but I'm just pulling out a few of them. How do you handle stress, home, work, life, being able to focus on a problem until it's solved, and then easily distracted. All of this trending in a way that you would hope. Virtually, they all agree. The course has helped make them more effective. 99% plan to continue. And every single person, and this last one is the one that I feel most pleased with, is that every single person that has taken this class has felt it would be a good use of their time. And this was really based on the 6-week class. So that's a lot of time at work. You say, wow, you know, can you really, 6 weeks, an hour and a half once a week. And they have assignments in between. So you have practice assignments. 6 months later, about 90% have applied. I saw Dr. Davidson from Wisconsin last night give a lecture at the Museum of Science, and he asked me, well, what's happening in 6 months? Are they still practicing? And there's 2 ways to practice, informal and formal. Formal is like what we just did, and you say, you know, 5 days a week for 15 minutes, I'm going to practice breath meditation. Informal is where you are bringing your conscious awareness to your daily life. So every time you remember or find that you're ruminating, you just come back to where you are. And you could be waiting in line somewhere and, you know, see that you're daydreaming, and then just kind of bring yourself into the moment. You know, bring yourself to where you are. And that is informal practice. So key points. There has not been a lot of pressure to demonstrate results, which when I give lectures, and I recently taught to a group of meditation instructors, and their opinion is, I've got to prove it works, I've got to prove it works. And I can tell you honestly that the question most companies ask me is not, what's your data, I want to see that this works. Most are asking, what is mindfulness? What will my employees hear? What is it? So it's not that I never get that, and we have at least self-report data, but there's scientific data that's also demonstrating the results. Most companies want to know what it is. We didn't start with leadership. And our group, we mixed it up by age, race, gender, and level in the company. So there are some people that say, oh, you got to start with leaders and trickle down, and we did not do that. In fact, it bubbled up to the CEO of our company where he'd see me and go, oh, wait, you're the mindfulness person, and took a kind of an interest in it. But I'm not sure if we said, can we do it in 2006? It would have been, I don't know, maybe it would have been. Oh, the other thing I just say that it's really important to align with corporate culture. So when I gave a talk to a bunch of trainers in mindfulness recently, this last one I said, you know, you want to integrate it into the way the culture currently does things. So how do you currently offer programs? How do you do it? And so that there's not a prescriptive way for how to do it, but do it in a way that best fits the organization. So mindfulness is moving mainstream in really, really big ways. There is a conference in Silicon Valley called Wisdom 2.0, so Twitter and Facebook and Google, they're all doing mindfulness and started a conference about 4 years ago. There's Thich Nhat Hanh, the Zen Vietnamese monk at the World Bank, Metu Ricard, who is a French monk and also has a PhD in molecular biology, which he's a fascinating guy. You have the CEO of Aetna Insurance Company, and just recently Time Magazine. I don't know if anybody saw the cover of Time, but so these are just a few, but certainly not all. Some of the studies, the peer-reviewed studies through 2013, and you can see mindfulness in the red, which it's, right around 2010, 11, it just took a really big leap up. And so getting started, I'm coming to an end right now. So what I would say is download the free 3-minute guided practices that are on our Mind the Moment site, and you can just grab one of those cards or take that down. There is an app I love called Headspace. It's fabulous, and they have a free sort of sample, it's called Take 10. So it's 10 days of meditation for 10 minutes. And it's guided by this guy, Andy. They're a British company. They're actually just moved to Santa Monica, but they have some people still in London. Headspace is fabulous, so I would check them out. We have recommended books on the website, and I will not put a book up there unless I know I'm familiar with the author and I've read it. And then we have our Facebook page. And that's it. Should we do we have like a minute to do 1 minute of meditation?
No. I'm just being respectful of everybody's time.
It's 11:53.
Yeah.
Okay.
But,
all right.
So does anybody have any questions? And then I'm going to do some last minute and then Julie can.
Okay. Thank you so
thank
much.
you. And there's more copies back here from CPH News about the toolkit. So feel free to take more copies if you'd like, so you can send them in your potential design team.